Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are taking an incredible journey way back in time to explore the totally unseen world of early Filipino culture. We're going to trace the fascinating human experience of our ancestors all the way from their super practical daily routines right through to their deepest, most closely held beliefs about the afterlife. It's going to be a great trip.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the invisible Filipino culture. Then, gods, spirits, and animism. Third, magic, omens, and amulets. Fourth, practical life and baybayin. And finally, number 5, the journey to the afterlife.
Starting off with Section 1, the invisible Filipino culture, making the unseen seen. You know, when we study history, it's so easy to just fixate on the stuff we can touch, like ancient architecture, pottery, or weapons. But while we obviously can't physically hold non-material culture in our hands, it vividly shaped early society. We're talking about the beliefs, religion, traditions, language, and literature of a people. It's literally the invisible heartbeat of our ancestors' existence. It was the framework that gave their entire physical world meaning. Moving right along to Section 2, gods, spirits, and animism, the spiritual realm. Picture this for a second. Imagine being born into a world where everything around you, every mountain, every river, the stars in the sky, was alive with a spirit. For early Filipinos, nature itself was deeply divine, and sitting at the absolute pinnacle of this animistic belief system was Bathala, recognized as the supreme god and the ultimate creator. But Bathala definitely wasn't running the cosmos alone. Now, what's really interesting here is how beautifully specific their pantheon of deities and nature spirits was. These were known as Anitos and Diwatas, and they were tied directly to everyday survival. You've got Idianale for agriculture, Sidapa for death, Mandarangan for war, and Magwayan for the sea. They even had a goddess of love, Diang Masalanta. Their spiritual world wasn't just some abstract concept, right? It perfectly mirrored the very real practical needs of their daily lives. But here's the catch. You couldn't just casually chat with these invisible gods. They required very visible, physical rituals to maintain harmony and ask for blessings. Enter the Magamito. This was a crucial ritual offering of prayers and food to ask for wishes and basically ensure a prosperous life. And ordinary folks didn't lead this. They relied on highly respected spiritual mediators, the Katalonan in Tagalog or the Babaylan in Visayan. These leaders were absolutely essential. They were the bridge connecting the human community directly with their ancestors and the divine. That brings us to Section 3, magic, omens, and amulets, navigating the supernatural. So beyond worshiping the major gods, everyday life was still incredibly unpredictable. And they managed this through a complex system of signs. They believed nature was constantly speaking to them. And let me tell you, these omens were taken incredibly seriously. Something as simple as a dog howling in the distance, a black cat crossing your path, or just the subtle clicking sound of a lizard on the wall, that could completely dictate a person's choices for the day. These were vital warning systems right from the unseen world. To actively protect themselves from both physical and spiritual threats, they turned to the Agimat. Think of this as the ultimate supernatural shield. It's a physical amulet believed to grant the wearers special powers, and it was especially prized for protection in the chaos of battle. And when they needed to know what was coming down the pike, they'd consult the Bangatahuan, the fortune tellers, to help them navigate the murky, dangerous waters of the future. And honestly, they really needed that protection because they firmly believed their world was crawling with terrifying creatures lurking just out of sight. They lived in genuine fear of the Aswang, a shape-shifting supernatural being, the Mangkukulam or witch, the Tikbalang, this super deceptive creature with a horse's head, and perhaps the most chilling one of all, the Tiyanak, a vampire-like creature that took the innocent form of a crying child. Creepy, right? Let's move to Section 4 and see how this all builds into their daily routines, practical life, and baybayin skills for survival. Okay, so even with a world completely full of spirits and magic, the daily physical work of survival still had to get done. They didn't have formal school buildings, obviously, but they did have a rigorous, home-based education system taught directly by the parents. And the curriculum was strictly divided. Boys were trained in outward-facing survival skills: warriors, hunters, farmers, miners. Girls, meanwhile, were trained in the internal running of the community through things like weaving, animal care, and cooking. This division of labor basically guaranteed immediate survival and perfectly prepared the youth for their future family roles. Actually, do me a favor, take a second and look at your own hands and arms. Our ancestors used this incredibly ingenious, universally accessible measurement system based right on the human body. A dipa was the distance between your stretched arms. A dankal was the span from your thumb to your pinky. A tamuro went from your thumb to your index finger. A damak was the width of your 5 pressed fingers. And a sandali was simply the width of a single finger. I mean, talk about handy. Literally no standard rulers required.
They didn't just measure, they wrote. They documented their world using a beautifully structured indigenous writing system called Baybayin. It was made up of 17 letters in total, 3 vowels and 14 consonants. And instead of manufactured paper and pens, they just used the natural world right around them. They inscribed these characters onto leaves, tree bark, or bamboo, using a sepal, which was a sharp tool like a knife, and they used plant stalks to create their ink. Which brings us to our final chapter, Section 5, the journey to the afterlife, death and beyond.
We've reached the inevitable end of the human experience. Early Filipinos held a deep, reverent belief that a person's soul was completely immortal, and because of this, they treated physical remains with immense respect through a highly emotional 2-part burial process. Step 1 was the primary burial, where the deceased was cleaned, dressed, and buried right in the ground with tools and food to help them in the afterlife. Then, in Step 2, the secondary burial, the dried remains were lovingly removed from the earth and placed permanently inside a specialized burial jar. So, the crucial point here is that these spiritual beliefs aren't just invisible myths lost to time, they left behind tangible, breathtaking archaeological evidence. A perfect example of this is the Manungul Cave in Palawan. Researchers there discovered massive burial jars containing actual human bones interred alongside weapons. It is a stunning physical manifestation of their non-material belief in the soul's ongoing journey. For the living left behind, grief was expressed through very complex, deeply emotional mourning rituals. Up in Luzon, mourners would wear white clothing as a visual symbol of their sorrow. They would even hire professional mourners to sing and share stories of the deceased's good deeds during wakes. A really vital community practice was the pasyam, which involved 9 straight days of intense prayer for the departed soul. And that whole process culminated in a massive community feast on the 9th day, bringing relatives and friends together to heal and celebrate the life that was lived. But how you mourned also heavily depended on the societal status and gender of the deceased. Mourning for a woman was called mordal, and for a man, it was maglahi. But look at what happened when a datu, a tribal chief, passed away. This high-status mourning was called lara, and its rules were absolute. When lara was declared, it literally stopped wars in their tracks. Think about that. Spears had to be carried pointing straight down to the ground as a sign of respect, and singing or wearing any colorful garments was strictly banned across the entire barangay until the mourning period was officially over.
And this brilliantly illustrates the profound depth of early Filipino non-material culture. From the spirits they saw in the trees to the protective amulets they wore into battle, their invisible beliefs dictated absolutely every single visible action. Which brings us to a final, pretty provocative question. How much of our ancestors' unseen world still lives on in our culture today? Think about it. The superstitions we still playfully observe, or the respect we continue to pay to our departed. It's all connected. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and I will see you next time.